Judging public presentations, demonstrations, and illustrated talk. This is such a valuable life skill for kids to learn, and this contest wouldn't be possible without volunteers like you. A 4-H public presentation can be a demonstration, meaning the member actually makes or shows something with props, or an illustrated talk with no boards and or props, with boards and or props. But if a member shows up with only note cards, with no boards or props, send them back with your clerk, as that's public speaking, judged on a different form, usually by a different judge who specializes in that. When you arrive, take a few minutes to sign in, get a name tag and a cup of coffee or a bottle of water. We'll assign you a clerk, if we have enough of them, and a room to judge in. When you sign in or in your room, you'll have a clipboard, some scratch paper, some pencils, and the award stickers. They're blue, red, and white ribbons that go on the certificates. Your clerk will get a clipboard with a clerk sheet on it and a stopwatch. On the clerk form, we need all the information filled out. It's specific to you, the judge, rather than moving with the clerk, and the clerk signs or initials each line for each presentation that they see. We need the member's name, level, subject or title of talk, and that's important because if we have a question, you may not remember Jane Smith, but you'll remember, oh, the talk about alligators. The time that the talk took to give, the ribbon placement, and again the clerk. When the member comes back, if you know that member, have your clerk take him or her back to the desk and get the next person in line, as we can't judge anyone in our own family, club, or someone we know well. This form is filled out by your clerk. Last name, first name, age division, years in 4-H, you're really going to want to know that. Club name, and then down here is where the clerk records the score. We need the score here and on the clerk sheet if there are questions. That's kind of a backup system. And this registration sheet goes to the front desk after each talk. So when the clerk walks the person back to pick up the next person for you to judge, they take this to the desk. The member will bring to you the score sheet and a blank presentation with their name on it. After you judge the talk, you sign it as the judge and put your ribbon award sticker. They'll also bring back to you this sheet, the scorecard. We don't need all that information on the top filled out because it's just for them, but you'll want their name there, the name of their talk. Then there's a place for you to write the ribbon placing and total score. Yes, we do want you to do scores. And then to write down your name as judge. And then in the upper right corner, I'd like you to record the time of the talk. This again goes home with the member. As part of visual aids, boards are not required, but they sure are a good addition to most talks. If they're used, there may be any number of them, and they may be any shape or size. They don't have to be just the standard, large, floppy, sometimes hard to handle poster board. The kids can cut those in half and use them horizontally or vertically. The only hard and fast rule about boards is that you need to be able to read every word on them. They shouldn't have the whole talk written out on them. They're a visual aid with illustrations and an outline of words to support the talk, or just photos or drawings. If you notice the boards are awkward for the member, you might suggest next time that he use half-size boards, or make the front or back board on stiff but lightweight foam core. There are lots of different ways to use the boards. Again, the main rule is that you can read everything on them. It used to be that borders were required on any kind of public board. That's not the case anymore. The board shown here is a reference board. I often recommend the kids use that because it's nicer than listening to www. Since so many websites are used now. If they have a reference board there, they can just say, my references were, and point out the items, or say them in an abbreviated form since you have them to see. That's kind of a nice way to do it. This board is on foam core. It's very easy to handle. Sometimes I'll recommend that members put just one board of their talk on foam core, and then the foam core can support the lighter weight boards. This board is a good example. In the book that she enlarged this picture from, the markings, the directional arrows, had tiny little words, even when she enlarged it, that you couldn't read from far away. And this I see all the time in talks. They have this whole board to use, and they leave the print too small to read. Here, she just used little mailing labels and wrote the words larger so they could be read the legal 10 feet away. This is the back side of the reference board on that earlier talk. They can use two sides. That's a good use of boards. A summary is nice to have on their board too. Something just as simple as, today I told you about the history of coffee and espresso drinks, the techniques for making them, and some fun facts about coffee. Here's another summary and reference board together. My beating history, why, how it's done, references a few websites, and my own, I think a word fell off, my own experience. This board has a strip of foam core in the back. That's also a helpful thing for kids. Just same thing, makes the board stiffer so it doesn't flop. Another example of making sure all the words are large enough to read. Photos enlarged, big enough to see what's on them from a distance, again on foam core. Here's a board that's horizontal, half-size poster board. Now this would be an exception to the read every word on the page rule. And that works because you're not meant to read every word. Some of those are just kind of background. Another board that's half-size. Again, you can read everything from the required 10 feet away. Another resources board. This is one of the lots of websites used, and it's nice to just be able to say, my resources were AskJeeves.com, Author's Den, Makeup 411. And besides being nice for the judge to see it, the member can refer to that instead of having all of that written out on cards. So those are just some board ideas. Along with making suggestions, if you notice the members having trouble with their boards, you can make suggestions with note cards. A large sheet of paper is not a good plan. It's too easy to rustle that and move it around. Note cards are just fine. One year my daughter had a broken thumb and she dropped all her note cards. So after that we went to a connected book like this. And you can see on her pages she didn't put all the words. Just kind of an outline. And in fact she would put board 1 so she would remember when to change the board. And just have some key words. 5th grade, 6th year, explore, 3rd presentation. That worked for them, and then you can't drop it and get your cards out of order. It's really nice if they have cards to rely on, not to read from. So if you see that a member is relying too heavily on them, you can suggest that they just put the outline. Another problem we run into with boards sometimes is the student has used their science fair project for their public presentation perfectly fine if the information's suitable and appropriate. But it's not okay usually to use the same board because that's meant to be looked at up close and personal. And a public presentation, everything needs to be clear from 10 feet away. They can use those trifold boards as long as they alter the talk so that you can read every word from 10 feet away. And the other problem with science fair boards is if the information isn't appropriate. Sometimes it's way too much information for a younger member, but that's again a judgment call. Ability to answer questions and clarity of voice. The clarity of voice is if you are able to hear, so just strictly volume, or if they tended to look down, or sometimes you get where they look back at their boards instead of looking at you. So that's where I would mark both of those things down. In questions, only ask questions that are closely related to their talk. If you ask something just because you're curious, that's fine, but you wouldn't, give them a deduction because they didn't know an answer to an unrelated question. And there has to be a closing. We see this so often. Closing is different from a summary, which they also need, and both should be marked down here. They can't just stop talking, which sometimes you see. They just stop in the end of a sentence, or sometimes they say, "That's it," both of which aren't appropriate, but we hear often. There should be something definite like, "Today I told you about the 3 different types of and why they're important." It doesn't need to be much more than that. As a brief summary, then their references. That's when the clerk should stop timing the talk after the conclusion, but before the references. Questions should not be included in the timing. Team presentations are rare, but the work needs to be divided evenly. Then the rest of the judging is the same. The final section is worth 15 points, so not as much. Appearance, don't judge the clothing, etc., but if someone has really dressed down, you might want to mention, when you're presenting to the public, it's nice to take time to make sure you dress nicely or are neat and tidy or whatever. It's nice when members dress up or dress in a way that relates to their subject matter. This is where you can say it's easy to be a little bit nervous. You probably didn't notice you were swaying, or as I saw once, standing on one foot. And you might recommend that they practice a lot in front of family, friends, even a mirror. Composure, posture, how they carry themselves. If something goes wrong, how do they handle it? We heard a story of a girl who was doing a presentation, making strawberry shortcakes, so really a demonstration, and she forgot to put the lid on the blender. But she handled it very well. So that's kind of what we're looking for. Things go wrong, but how they handle it. Do they smile, have good eye contact? Nervousness is normal, but if they're overcoming it, that's a good point. Do they questions? They don't need to be repeated, but it's okay if they are. And if they go on to state, they do need to repeat the questions. So a lot of them are taught to get in the habit of that. Then at the bottom, there's plenty of room for you to write remarks and overall comments and make your scoring. This is the information that needs to be on the top of the scorecard. The title of the talk, the name of the member, your ribbon placing, your score, your name as judge, and the time of the talk. These are the scores for ribbon placings. A blue ribbon is from 100 down to 89. A red ribbon is from 88 down to 79. White is 78 down to 69. And a 68 and below is no placing. Assigning ribbons. What we want to make sure of is that our marks are consistent with the score we've decided on. We need to give them lots of constructive criticism, way to improve for next year, and when considering talks, you will find that you'll give mostly blue ribbons, which is fine. You will give some red. A white should be pretty rare, and especially rare for a first-year presenter. They may not have been trained and first time. You would generally make a few more allowances than on a later one. While we want to be fair and give accurate ribbon placings for our opinion as a human being judging a talk, when everyone earns a blue ribbon, the value of that blue ribbon is diminished. Same with a perfect score. That really should only be given if you really can't find any place to improve the talk. Here are a couple of just mock scorings that I've given. Name of the member. They've written the club name, that doesn't really matter. I've given this one a red ribbon, a score of 87. Probably suspect why there when you see the time was 1:12. I've signed it as judge, and here are my ratings. I felt the purpose of the demonstration was accomplished, but be sure to let me know that you'll find out the answer. So they must have just said, I don't know. On the next section, I have some check marks in the good, a couple in the fair, and a couple in the excellent. And that section was worth 35 points. This bottom section is worth 15. And I have, again, one in excellent, a couple in good. So looking at this, I would say the check marks support the red ribbon. Some of the comments I've made, and I'm just making these up, be sure to say your name, age, years, and 4-H. Great, colorful, easy to read posters. Practice so you're even more comfortable next time. So I'm always trying to find some good comments, and the comments that aren't good, I'm not wording them, roughly. Tell me the answer, or you didn't know the answers. I'm putting be sure to let me know. Keep smiling, good eye contact, maybe just an outline on your cards so you don't read from them, so they must have reverted to reading at times. So that's kind of the type of comments you'd want to make, and just make sure those check marks support the ribbon that you're giving. Another mock score, this one. Title is on there. I've ordered it blue with a score of 96. It was 9 minutes and 10 seconds. I've signed it. They marked in their division and grade in school. In the 50 points, I marked them both excellent. Good knowledge, you really researched. The next section, you might want to start with a question. Good knowledge, well researched. So I've just marked that down a little bit in the excellent. Would be interesting to look at, some actual, and I was trying to decide what word to put there, but I think I was going to do potatoes, given the talk was on potatoes. Posters are nicely done. I had a little trouble hearing at times, so I've marked that down to good. Great job. Remember to briefly summarize. If there was no summary at all, or they just stopped mid-sentence, you could put that in the no placing or the fair. Try to relax even more, so they must have looked a little bit nervous, but I only marked the arrows down a little, the check marks. Good eye contact. Good job. Posters are good. You might want to consider one that shows your references so you wouldn't have to list in such detail. Again, that's a common thing that we talked about before, but this person should be happy with a 96. And some suggestions to make it even better. And again, I feel like these ribbon placings support, the check marks that I've made support the ribbon placing. Mostly in the excellent category, with just a couple marked down. When you're making comments, both verbal and written, make them specific for improvement and personal to that member. Avoid words like can't, don't, never, always, no, should, and must, and try these kind of words instead. Consider, suggest, possible, something like, it might be possible for you to present this in a way that would make it easier to understand, or how about, may, another way, and next time is a favorite. Next time you might want to try this, just to encourage them to come back, that you know they've worked hard at it and you have some ideas for them to make it even better. And have you thought? Instead of you can't chew gum, something like, next time remember to take out your gum before. Instead of don't fidget, something like, it's easy to feel a little nervous, you probably didn't realize you were swaying, standing on one foot, playing with your hair, whatever it is. Next time it might help to practice with an audience or even in front of a mirror. Instead of don't read your notes, something like, it will help you to have good eye contact if you just write an outline on your note cards rather than every word. So the main thing is we're telling them something that was a little bit wrong, but we're saying it in a supportive way, and we're giving them specific ideas on how they can improve in that area. Thank you so much for judging talks. It's, again, such a valuable life skill for these members to learn, and it's not possible to run the contest without volunteer help. And I just thank you for putting time and effort into these kids' lives. Thank you.